explanation of learning. One of the earliest explanations of learning came from Aristotle. He said that we remember things when they are similar, when they contrast, and when they are contiguous. Most important, the third point, contiguity. Okay, because it is included in all explanations of learning by association. Right? So take a look at what the principle of contiguity states, that whenever two or more sensations occur together often enough, they will become associated. Later, when only one of these sensations occurs, the stimulus, the other will be remembered too. That is a response, right? So contiguity plays a major role in the learning process, as known as classical conditioning, as you see here, was KSR, like in what? In so look at what? Study what? The second what? The second explanation of learning is what called generalization. We generalize. Remember, we extrapolate. You know what I mean? Discrimination. Discrimination. When this appears, that is what tells you not to do this. Okay, that type of thing. Right. So that's classical conditioning. And then operant conditioning and the theories of reinforcement. You know, we have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and schedules of reinforcement. So all of these are what? So theories of reinforcement, operant conditioning. All right. So the other one is called what? The antecedents and behavior change. So here time is involved in operant conditioning. And antecedents, the events preceding behaviors, they provide information about which behaviors will lead to positive consequences and which will lead to negative consequences. Right? So here, Skinner's pigeons learned to peck for food when a light was on. When the light was on, but not to be bothered when the light was off, because no food followed pecking when the light was off. So in other words, the pigeons learned to use what the antecedent light as a cue to discriminate the likely consequence of pecking. So the pigeons pecking was under what we call stimulus control, controlled by the discriminative stimulus of the light. Right? So the antecedent cue of a school principal standing in the hall helps students discriminate the probable consequences of attempting to break into a locker. Is that right? Now, so we often respond to such antecedent cues without fully realizing that they are influencing our behavior. But teachers can use cues deliberately in the classroom, right? So like what? Like the principal standing in the hall, right? Now, so let's take a look at applied behavior analysis. So that is what, in other words, it's called what? Behavior modification. Now, the application of behavior learning principles to change behavior, right? That's behavior modification. So applied behavior analysis involves the following steps. First of all, what? say, clear specifications of the behavior to be changed. So, for example, shyness, okay, like one, a boy that is one very shy and refuses to talk to strangers. So careful what measurement of behavior. So how often and how long does this boy talk to strangers? Okay. Analysis of antecedents, so that's the stimulus, and what reinforces, what kind of reinforces that might be maintaining what inappropriate or undesirable behavior. Would it be past undesirable behaviors that stop the child, the boy, from from talking to stranger? Then intervention based on behavioral principles to change the behavior. Say using reinforcement, shaping, that type of thing, and careful measurement of changes. Right? Now, in research on what applied behavior analysis, behavior modification, and ABAB design is common. What is the ABAB design? A is the baseline measure. Okay, baseline measure. B, what? Intervention or treatment. So you measure the effect of one intervention treatment. Then you return back on A, baseline, okay, no treatment. So ABAB is actually something like this here. A, treatment. B, no treatment. No, A, no treatment. B, treatment. Okay, and then no treatment, then treatment. Right, that type of thing. Okay, this is called repeated measures. Okay, repeated measures design. Right, something like that. Okay, and of course in data analysis we have something like analysis of repeated measures. Right. All right. Okay, good. Method for encouraging behaviors. For example, about praise or reinforce with let's say teacher attention, okay, or something else, right? So let's say teachers can improve student behavior by ignoring rule breakers and praising students who are following the rules, okay? Many psychologists advise the teacher to what I mentioned before, accentuate the positive, That is liberally praise students for good behavior while ignoring mistakes and misbehavior. So, in other words, it's also called the praise and ignore approach. Well, this approach should be considered a method for dealing with minor misbehaviors, or an option to accompany other strategies. But to be effective, praise often used. Okay, so in order to accentuate the positive, praise must be contingent on the behavior to be reinforced. Then to be specific, specify clearly the behavior being reinforced. So you should be specific and be believable. Right? Be believable. Do not bluff. Okay? So in other words, the praise should be sincere recognition of a well-defined behavior. So students understand what they did to warrant what they need to do, okay, to warrant the recognition. Now, the thing is that the problem is that most teachers are too quick to squelch any unwanted behavior. Don't do this, don't do that, stop this, Stop that, okay? All right. And then they are what? They are less often depressed. But then what's here, the point is what? That accentuate what? Accentuate the positive is a good approach, all right? Okay. The Premack principle, okay, Premack principle, is what? A helpful guide for choosing the most effective reinforcer is the Premack principle, named after what? David Premack, who published what? A paper in 1965. And hence what later on it is called the Premack principle. Well, what is it here? Is that what? Using what? Say a high frequency behavior or a preferred activity. Example, okay, watch TV, or you let the student run around the classroom in front of the teacher, because what? They are seldom allowed to do this. Okay? It would be in their imagination if they could do that in front of the teacher and in front of everybody else in the class. Okay? So, all right. So these can be effective reinforcers for a low frequency behavior. Okay, low frequency behavior, a less preferred activity. For example, working on the math problems. Okay, this is sometimes referred to as what? The grandma's rule. Okay, what is that here? That is the first, do what I want you to do. Okay, then you may do what you want to do. Okay, that is to say what? This is what Premack principle, also called grandma's rule. Okay, so if you find yourself saying to a student, stop doing that and pay attention, or please put that away until the end of class, you have probably found the perfect reinforcer for the student. Is that right? All right. So stop doing that. Okay. So you would say that, okay, you pay attention to me first, and then I'll let you do that. Okay, that type of thing. So for the Premack principle to be effective, the low frequency behavior, less preferred behavior must happen first. Okay, it must happen first. Otherwise, is not good. Okay. All right. The next one here is shaping. Okay, shaping is also remember what we just talked about is shaping. It's also called the successive approximation. All right. For example, I'll give you a very good example here. Right. A 10th grade student tries each day to find some excuse for avoiding the softball game in the gym class. The student cannot catch a ball and now refuses to try. Okay, the ball, miss. So the student, no, I don't want to play. I don't want to play softball. Okay, I don't want to do that. All right, now, so another example, a 4th grade student looks at the result of the latest math test. No credit on almost half of the problems again, okay, because I made one dumb mistake in each problem. I hate math. That type of thing. In both situations, the students are receiving no reinforcement for their work because the end product of their efforts is not good enough. a safe prediction is that the students will soon learn to dislike the class, okay, and perhaps what dislike what is fellow what students, dislike the teacher and the school in general, right? All right, so shaping, as you see here, okay, involves what? Reinforcing progress, okay, instead of waiting for perfection. So that is the what? That is the idea, right? Now, in order to use shaping, the teacher must break down the final complex behavior, okay, that the student is expected to master into a number of smaller steps. This is called what? Task analysis. Okay? Task analysis simply breaks skills and processes down to sub-skills, sub-processes. Okay? So what do we do? Okay? Four what? Four methods here. Okay, four methods here. Here, the one, the first one here is what? Reinforce each sub-skill. Let's go back to the what? Let's go back to the what? The softball experiment. The softball what? Incident. So reinforce each sub-skill. That's the first step. For example, be able just to touch the ball, okay? And reinforce improvements in accuracy. That's to say, touch the ball each time, okay? And what? Then reinforce longer and longer periods of performance. So it to encourage what? The student to stay with the game. And then reinforce what? Longer and longer periods of participation. Right? So volunteer to participate longer than you do that, okay? So to attend the game, you reinforce it, and to pick up the ball, you reinforce it, okay? Pick up the ball more often, you reinforce it, okay? Throw the ball, you reinforce it, and so on, okay? Sub-skills, okay? So shaping is good for skills that involve practice, endurance, increased accuracy, greater speed, and what? And also on what? It's good on what? Extensive practice to master. All right. So because shaping is a rather time-consuming process, okay, it should not be used if success can be attained through simpler methods like cueing, okay, like what? Follow what schedule of reinforcement, okay, that type of through continuous reinforcement. All right, number four, we have what we call a positive practice. When students make a mistake, okay, they must correct it as soon as possible and practice the correct response. Okay, so this is called practice the correct response. All right. Now, the same principle can be applied when students break classroom rules. However, instead of being punished, the student might be required to practice the correct alternative action. Okay, so that's called positive practice. It is not what punishment, it is just what you practice what is required. Okay, that type of thing. Okay, so this is called what? This is called positive practice. Right? Coping with undesirable behaviors. Right? So no matter how successful you are at accentuating the positive, there are times when you must cope with undesirable behavior. Okay? Either because other methods do not seem sufficient or because the behavior itself is dangerous or calls for direct action. Okay? For example, a lunatic is running around raising hells, that type of thing, all right? So what do we do here? So the first one we consider is called negative reinforcement. So if an action stops or what avoids what something unpleasant, okay, then the action is likely to occur again in similar situation. Okay, so if an action could stop something unpleasant, for example, removal of unpleasant stimulus. All right? Now, you see here, negative reinforcement may be used to enhance learning. Okay, to do this, you place students. First of all, you have to place students in a mildly unpleasant situations so that they can escape when their behavior improves. Okay, so that's the prerequisite. Okay, so the steps in doing that is this here. You see, you identify target behavior, okay, and you put the student or put the subject in an annoying situation. For example, no recess, no candy, no field trip. You do that? No field trip. Okay. Now, if target behavior, if you see the target behavior, then B. Okay. No. That to say, if you see the target behavior, if you see A target behavior, then no B. B is what you put the subject in an annoying situation. Okay? Here, so you see that if you do this, I remove you from what? From no recess. Okay, I remove you from what? From no field trip. That means you could go to field trip now. So here, the subject regain control. Is that right? Is that you can change the consequence. Right? So that is what negative reinforcement. Remember here, negative reinforcement, you want what? You want to increase behavior. Okay. All right. Another example. Okay. Teacher talk to what? Say to a third year grade 3 class. I don't know what is third year. A grade 3 class. When the supplies are put back in the cabinet and each of you is sitting quietly, we will go outside to have the recess. Until then, we will miss our recess. Right? So then here, the class the class retains students. All the students, they retain control. All right? Now, another example here for use of negative reinforcement is that here, to a student who seldom finishes in-class assignments, okay? The teacher would say, as soon as you complete the assignment, okay, you may join the class in the auditorium. But until you finish, you must walk in the study hall. Okay, so here the control is passed on to the student. Is that right? It's passed on to the student. So these examples, they are not about punishment, because the focus in each case is on strengthening, increase those specific behaviors. So negative reinforcement gives students a chance to exercise control. Missing recess and staying behind in the study hall are unpleasant situations for grade 3 class, for a grade 3 student. But in each case, the student retains control. All right. So as soon as they perform the appropriate behavior, the unpleasant situation ends. So in contrast, punishment occurs after the fact, and the student cannot so easily control or terminate it. Okay, you do this, you die, that type of thing. All right. So punishment is for what? You see what here? Punishment is for undesirable behavior. Punishment method out? Students or a subject has no control. Is that right? So, but then in negative reinforcement, students or the subject has control. All right. Now, there are several rules. For negative reinforcement. Okay, for negative reinforcement. First, you describe the desired change in a positive way. Okay, accentuate the positive. Do not bluff. Make sure you enforce the unpleasant situation. Okay, no recess. Okay, follow through despite complaints. Okay, the lunatic will say, let me go. It's boring here. Please let me go. That type of thing. Okay, you don't give up. Okay, insist on action, not promises. Most students, I promise you, I will not do that next time. I honestly promise you. Okay. Now, if the unpleasant situation terminates when students promise to be better next time, you have what? You have reinforced what? Making promises, not making changes. This is a grave mistake made by a lot of teachers. All right, so this is not good. Okay, we have to avoid reinforcing promises. Okay, action. All right. Number 2, saturation. To insist that students continue the problem behavior until they are tired of doing it. All right. For example, a child makes all sorts of unusual motions in his desk, like moving around, doing this type of thing. Okay, the teachers, they suggest that okay, you continue to do that for 5 minutes. Well, when a demand occurs, the student hear the teacher demands that you do that continually for 5 minutes. Okay, so most of the time the student would stop doing that. It's no fun. Okay, so saturation should be applied with care. All right. Forcing students to continue some behaviors may be physically or emotionally harmful. Sometimes maybe dangerous. Okay, all right. So teachers also may allow students to continue some actions until they stop by themselves if the behavior is not interfering with the rest of the class. Okay, a teacher can do this by simply another approach instead of saturation, simply ignore the behavior. All right, so ignore the behavior. Now, Remember the following here is that one. Ignoring, remember that responding to an ignorable behavior, okay, may actually reinforce it, right? Sometimes what you just ignore it. Then what the students say, no, doing this won't attract any attention, so they will give up, right? Now, in using situation, if what you decide to use situation, a teacher must take care not to give in before the student do. Okay, you don't say, oh, all right, enough. No. 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes will be 5 minutes. It is also important that the repeated behavior be the one you are trying to end. Okay, if the teacher insisted that the student making all sort of unusual movement, right? Okay, I will never make unusual motions in the class. Okay, you write this 500 times. Is that good? Is that good? No. See, the student would have become saturated with writing rather than with making unusual motion. Right? When I was a teenager, I think before I was a teenager, Peter Chow misbehaved in the classroom a lot of time. I was an awful student at that time. Okay, when I was a kid. Okay, you better stay away from me. Okay, and too many times the punishment for Peter Chow misbehavior would be you write this here. I will never break the rules. Okay, 500 times. So what I did was I paired 3 pencils at that time. That was way back. I used 3 pencils to write. Okay, and write quickly. Okay, so very soon I finished the 500 lines. It's easy. Okay, that type of thing, right? And then at time sometime I remember one time I used I used 5 pencils together, and I used two pieces of very thin wood, so that I put them together so that they won't fall off, and that type of thing. I use a rubber band, I do that, and then I use 5 pencils to write I will never break the rules, that type of thing. Anyway, okay, so let's take a look at another one here is that you scold the student, reprimands. All right, there are soft reprimands and there are loud reprimands. Okay, and psychologists performed lots of experiments, and then they came up with the following. Okay, in order for reprimands to be effective, it should be reprimands. They should be soft and private instead of loud and public. Okay, to deal with disruptive behavior. Right? Why? Some students enjoy public recognition for misbehavior. Look at me. That type of thing. Okay. If reprimands are not used too often, and if the classroom is generally a positive, warm environment, the students usually respond quickly, soft, private. Okay? All right. Now here you focus on students' action, not on students' personal qualities. So you don't take it personally. Okay. Some example will be you reprimand in a calm but firm voice. Calm but firm. Avoid vindictive or sarcastic sarcasm. Okay. You avoid what sarcastic words or tones of voice. Okay? You might hear your own angry words later when students imitate what your sarcasm. Right? Stress the need to end the problem behavior instead of expressing any dislike you might feel for the student. I hate you. Okay, no, don't do that. Okay, make it calm but firm voice. Okay, all right. So, you don't want here what we have frequency here that what you what do not do that very often. If you don't do that very often, once you do it, it becomes what quite effective. All right. So avoid personal attack. All right. Now response cost. That is to say, once you misbehave here, you have to pay for it, all right? That type of thing. So just the opposite of what we call what token reinforcement programs. Okay, that's to say here, but response cost is that you pay a fine for infractions of rules. So in a classroom situation, the first time a student breaks a class rule, the teacher gives a warning, all right? Usually this is the case. The second time the teacher makes a mark beside the student's name in the grade book, the student loses 2 minutes of recess time for each mark accumulated, or loses the privilege of working in a group or going on a field trip, right? Something like that. So that's response cost. Okay, so you continue to disrupt the class. Well, I will mark it. Okay, you lose this, you lose that. Okay, so that to say they have to. It is what say you give the control back to the disruptor. All right, here you have control. Okay, you have control. Okay, so you can you just do whatever you want. Okay. All right, the last one is what? Social isolation, also called what? Timeout. Okay, timeout. It involves what? Removing a highly disruptive student from the classroom for 5 to 10 minutes. Okay? The student is placed in an empty, uninteresting room alone. It seems likely that the factor that actually decreases behavior is the punishment of brief isolation from other people. Say here, you don't get any attention, you're facing 4 empty walls. Okay? All right. So that's like solitary confinement, but then you hear is that time is very short. Okay. Now, usually what teachers would do a trip to the principal's office, okay, or confinement to a chair in the corner of the regular classroom. Or these two do not have the same effect as sitting in an empty room. Okay, so have you seen that sometimes they tell you, okay, you go to the VP's room, okay, and then the disruptive student will just get up proudly, look at the class here, look at me, and then walk, okay, march out of the classroom to the VP's office. That's not punishment. That's not good. Okay, so social isolation. The word social is important, right? That there is no socialization here. You're facing 4 empty walls, right? All right. Now, so some cautions regarding punishment. Punishment in an educational setting. Okay, punishment in and of itself does not lead to any positive behavior. Therefore, whenever you consider the use of punishment, you should make it part of a two-pronged attack. The first one, okay, the first goal is to carry out punishment and suppress the undesirable behavior. But the second goal is to make clear what the students should be doing instead, and to provide what reinforcement for those desirable actions. Right? So that is what more positive, is that right? Thus, while the problem behaviors are being suppressed, positive alternative responses are being strengthened. Right? So what? That is what? That is a good approach, is that right? That is a good approach. So social isolation, timeout is good, but then what? Here we should what? We should be concerned with what? Be thoughtful about punishment, and then what? Try to what? Think of alternatives, okay, to reinforce what? Positive what behaviors instead of punishing negative behavior. So accentuate the positive is something what teacher should what consider more often. Right? Good. Okay. And thank you. Okay. Thank you.